Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about negotiation points when buying an investment property. Now before I get into all of that, I've got about 8 or 9 of negotiation points. But first of all, I just want to start off by saying when negotiating on a property, the first thing that you need to make sure that you're not doing is offering the asking price. Now I know this is like, obviously common sense, but I just really feel like it's worth calling out. Like the only instance where you might offer the asking price is basically when the listing says like offers over. And so in cases like that, when it says like, offers over £200,000, then you would offer the asking price and sometimes a little bit more depending on the, the demand and competition for that property. So now that we're agreed on the fact that you do not offer the asking price in the first instance, apart from, certain cases, I guess the next question is, okay, cool, then, what do I offer? Is there sort of like a guideline figure? Is there a guideline percentage below asking price that I should be offering? And personally, I feel like the answer is yes and no. I say yes, there is a certain number or percentage below asking price you should start from if the property is like a refurb project. So maybe it needs a new bathroom and a kitchen. I'd say for properties like that, you want to start off at least like 20k below asking price, because then you've incorporated the fact that you're gonna have to spend some money on this property to bring it up to scratch, because without doing these things you may not be able to get tenants in the property. So yeah, if it's a refurb project, then I'd say at least 20k below asking price. Obviously, depending on the actual state of the property, you may need to go a lot higher than this, but yeah, I'd say as a guideline, a 20k if it's a bit of a refurb. If the property doesn't actually require any work and it will just be like little like decorative things that you'd personally want to do in terms of like your own taste, then I'd say there's not really like a guideline figure as to how much below asking price you should offer. But I think things like, your own personal affordability, so like affordability minus like, how much you'd want to spend to do up the property to your own taste, you want to take that into consideration. You also want to take into consideration how much similar properties in the area were sold for. So like properties on that street of the same, build, the same number of rooms, how much were they sold for? That can be a guideline also. And finally, you should also have an understanding that, if a property is high in demand, there's a lot of competition for it, then you should be prepared to pay like asking price or even higher in order to be able to get that property. Now, as an investor, I'm not saying that, if a property is high in demand, you should continue to try and go for it. But what I am saying is that if you are adamant on getting it, then you're going to have to know that you're going to have to spend a bit more on that property. Obviously, as long as the numbers still stack up and it's profitable, then yeah, as an investor, you may still want to go ahead with it. But if it's a case whereby, overpaying on the asking price is going to like, have a negative effect on the numbers that you had planned, then you may want to walk away. Now, finally, before I go into the negotiation points when buying an investment property, I also just want to say that currently the market is a bit of a seller's market. So there's a lot of movement in the property market. Like sellers are getting their asking price and, above. And that's simply because there's a lot of interest in property right now. A lot of people are trying to buy. And so, sellers are able to maximize on this. And so it's just a bit of a warning that although you do want to be looking for BMV deals, below market value deals as an investor, like this shouldn't necessarily stop you if you're not able to get something below market value. As long as the numbers still stack, then you should still go ahead and go for it, because at the end of the day, like property is a long-term game. And so really, even if you don't get a certain percentage below market value, as long as you're holding out for the long term, then the property will naturally increase in value and you'll make your money anyway. So yeah, that's just a bit of a heads up. Okay, so now moving on to the fun part of the video, let's talk the actual negotiation points for an investment property. Now, first of all, it is how long has the property been on the market? Generally, the longer a property has been on the market, the more like motivated the seller is going to be. Well, that is the principle anyway. So basically, if you've seen a property online that's been on there for like maybe, 3-6 months, then likelihood is that the seller is going to be a bit more of a motivated seller. They're going to be more urgent or more desperate for a sale, and so in that case you can go in and get more of a discount. That is the the best case scenario. On the other hand, if a property's only been listed for about maybe a week or a month, then you're unlikely to get the same kind of discount, because the seller's not going to be as motivated. Well, that's what you assume anyway. Some sellers come on the market and they're motivated from day one. It just depends on their circumstances. The second negotiation factor is how long the seller has owned the property for. So if it's a seller that's owned the property for maybe like 10 plus years, 20 years, they are likely to be able to get a really good discount, because the likelihood is they bought the property like super cheap, and so they've definitely made their money over those 10-20 years. So you can go in and offer like 30k, 20k below asking price confidently, knowing that those kind of sellers are going to be less strict in terms of like how much I must sell the property for, because the thing is they've made loads of money on on that property over the years without necessarily having to do much. Now, the ability that you have to be able to offer like significantly below asking price from someone that's owned their property for a long time does not necessarily mean that they have to accept your offer. Like, they're well within their rights to reject and say, no, I want something higher. And obviously that can be for a number of reasons. It may be a case whereby, you know, over the years they've spent some money to, you know, really do up that property, or maybe they're just, you know, well invested in the property. There may be a number of different reasons, but regardless, approaching these kind of sellers will definitely put you in a better position to be able to get, you know, more of a discount on the property than if you were to approach somebody that's only, you know, had the property for maybe a couple of years, you know, up to 5 years, because, you know, you don't know what the market's been like, whether it's been good, whether it's been bad, whether they've gained some equity, how much equity they've gained, or maybe even if they've lost and maybe they're like sort of in negative equity. So yeah, that's definitely a strong negotiation factor, you know, how long the person has owned the property for. Now, the third negotiation factor is basically like the seller's position. Like, you know, why are they selling and what's the need? Is it an urgent thing? Is it a case whereby they're in the process of buying another property and so they quickly need to sell the current one as soon as possible? If that's the case, then they're going to be a very motivated seller. And we all know that with motivated sellers, you can get a lot more of a discount on a property. In terms of trying to find out a seller's position, you don't even have to wait until like the day of the viewing. These are things that you can gauge and find out from the estate agent if it's been listed with one prior to the viewing. So when you first come in contact with the estate agent, you can ask them a number of questions like, you know, what's the seller's position? Why are they selling? Is there a particular reason? Is there any urgency with the sale? Like all those kind of things. Once you get those answers, you can use those to negotiate your price. Another thing that I also personally like to do is like also try and gauge sort of like the minimum price or like around what kind of figure the seller would be wanting. So how I do that is basically like if I'm speaking to the agent, like prior to booking the viewing, I'll probably say something like, okay, you know, I have a budget of so amount. Do you think it's even worth me coming to view the property because, you know, this is what I'm willing to offer? I feel that when you ask the question in that way, even if the agent doesn't tell you like, you know, this is how much they want, they're still going to give you a yes or a no. And so if they say, yeah, you know, I think that's a bit low, at least you know where to start from in terms of like negotiation and your first offer. So that's a little tip there that I find really helpful. Negotiation point number 4, like how much have similar properties in the street, in the neighborhood sold for in the last few months up to a year? So if you're looking at buying a 3-bed terraced house in a particular area, a particular street, then I would look up, you know, recent sold house prices, whether on Zoopla or Rightmove, and basically use that as sort of my starting point in terms of like what my first offer should be. Of course, you don't want to offer like, you know, the price that those kind of properties were sold for, but it sort of gives you a guideline as to, you know, how much below that you can start your first offer from. Also, I know that at times it can be hard to find like recent house sales in terms of like similar properties to the one that you're trying to buy. And so another thing that I like to do is go based on like the square footage of the property. Most times this will be found on the floor plan of the property. And so if you find the square footage of the property and then multiply that by the cost per square foot of properties in that location, then really you're going to be in a good like sort of position as to, you know, really how much the property is worth and then how much you should offer in the first instance. The next negotiation factor is to know your numbers. Now, I know I touched upon this earlier in the video, but basically, like, if you know a property is going to need some work, then you want to factor that into your negotiation. So if it's a case where a property is fine, maybe it just needs like painting of the walls in the bedrooms, maybe some new carpets or flooring, maybe a new kitchen unit, then maybe you want to factor like around, you know, maybe 15k at least below asking price, just so that you know that you've covered all costs in terms of getting that property up to scratch again. The next negotiation factor is the cash buyer advantage. So cash buyers have a lot more advantage when it comes to property purchases. Like, sellers are more likely to want to go with a cash buyer than a mortgage buyer, and that's just because it seems a whole lot more secure. Like, it's a quicker purchase. Things are likely to go through a lot quicker than if you were to wait on a mortgage purchase that could take, you know, anything from 2 months, you know, onwards. So yeah, if you're a cash buyer, definitely use this as an advantage. Sellers are always willing to take less from a cash buyer than a mortgage buyer. So if you know that is you, to definitely use that to your advantage and get those discounts. The next negotiation factor is basically your ability to build confidence within a seller and basically like to reassure them that, you know, you are a serious seller. And a way to do this is to have a mortgage in principle. So you don't need to be a cash buyer necessarily. Yeah, that's a great one. But also if you're somebody that has a mortgage in principle, that puts you in a strong position because it shows that, you know, you're serious from the onset. It shows that, you know, I've spoken to the banks, I've spoken to the lenders, you know, this is a piece of paper that says how much they can give me and I'm ready to go. Another way to provide reassurance to a seller and build that confidence and trust in you is to basically provide a completion date. Now, a completion date that is sooner rather than later. By doing this, again, it shows the seller that you're someone that is serious. It shows that you're ready to go and you want to do this thing as soon as possible. Like, you want to complete sooner rather than later. That's always something that a seller wants to hear. So guys, those are all of my negotiation points when buying an investment property. However, before I end the video, I just want to leave you with 2 additional tips. And number 1, that is basically that, you know, when going on viewings and when speaking to sellers, you want to make sure that you do not come across as too excited, okay? If you do that, it may give the seller the impression that really like you're overly excited, and it may be a case whereby, you know, they can hold out. So even if you offer something that they would have been willing to accept, they may feel like, oh no, actually, I may be able to get some more out of this person. And so you don't want to do that to yourself. You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot. So when you go on viewings and when you're interacting with the seller, obviously, yes, be pleasant, be positive, but do not come across as like overly eager. My next piece of advice is to basically have a cut-off point. So when placing offers on a property, don't continue to go on and on and on. Like, I'd say about 3 offers is good, and then cut it off. Because again, you don't want to give the impression that you're overly excited about a property and that, you know, you're too keen about it. You want to let them know or give the impression that you have other options, and that, you know, if it doesn't work out with their property, then it's all good. You're an investor and, you know, there's other properties that they can take. So guys, that brings me to the end of this video. Hopefully you found it useful. If you have done, please do give it a thumbs up. And as always, please do let me know if there's any other video topics that you'd like me to cover on this channel, and I'll do so. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you later. Bye.